All right, how we doing? Nice. Pumped to be speaking with you guys tonight. My name is Mitch, and this is my lovely wife, Erin.
Hi.
And we have been on staff for the last 5 years, and we have been married for just about 2 years, which is crazy. It's a crazy thing to think about. You guys were wondering, Mitch, where are the photos? You got to see the photos. We got some money shots from the wedding, guys. Boom. That's the kind of one you hang up real proud right in the middle of the hallway. That's another good one. Bride, or whatever, the wedding party's in there. And then, boom, the dance floor. We are ripping it. I got the stank face. It must have been something good. I got the Celsius in my hand at 11 o'clock. Super wild. But yeah, guys, it's crazy. Marriage is awesome. Marriage is fun. It's been an awesome almost 2 years. But how did we get here? How did we get to sitting in front of like 100-something college students talking about relationships, right? Well, let me tell you. It started one night at my fraternity party, March 3rd, 2018. It was like any other weekend day, guys. I wake up just shy of 2 p.m. I find the least wrinkled jersey I own, put it on, the best jorts I own, perfectly cropped, the boots that do not make my calves look good. That goes on, and we go fuel up, right? We fuel up, teriyaki walk 2, and then it's time to hit the party. And guys, this is a glimpse of sophomore 2018 Mitch. That's what I was. That's
It's
what
actually like this is a scary accurate photo of what he looked like at the time. And the reason that we know what night it was that we met is because it was actually my 19th birthday. And so my best friend flew out from North Carolina, and we were gonna go out with some girls from my sorority. Yeah, that's a photo. So you never know when you're taking your like pre-going out pic, you can meet your husband that night, which is kind of crazy. And so we go to this fraternity party. We walk in. It's like every other fraternity party you've been to, like smelly, crowded, loud. And I like look in the middle of the room, and there's this guy that looks like a ton like this, and he's doing this dance move that like I can only describe as like a mix between like Western and break dancing. It's like super weird, and that was the first time that I saw Mitch.
I can't confirm or deny any sort of dancing allegations, but I will say I did always like to have some sort of a party trick. Maybe it was like a sales tactic, always remember me kind of thing. And especially in college, I did this thing at parties where, and it sounds so lame when you're just telling someone it, right? Many years later, but I would fake propose to random girls at the party.
Yeah, it's like as rough as it sounds.
No, it was cool. It was really cool. Super cool.
But it's not going where you think it's going, because he didn't fake propose to me. He actually fake proposed to 2 of my best friends that night. So one of them being that girl, 2 of them ended up being my bridesmaids. So that was some great speeches at our rehearsal dinner. But I obviously got the real ring in the end, so I won.
That's right. Well, technically I won, right, in that scenario. But guys, what's funny is we actually wouldn't date for 4 years after that. We did just kind of become party friends, like we're fraternity, sorority, just party friends. But it was at that time that I was starting to get involved in StuMo, and I ended up going to StuMo's summer project, Kaleo. That's us on the beach there, CSU's crew back then. But that summer was amazing for me. I spent 8 weeks out in California growing in my walk with God. It was actually where I decided to go all in my faith, and it was amazing. I began to see myself distance away from sin in my life. I saw my relationship with God and my habits start to grow, and most importantly, my view of the world started to change, right? My view of myself, my view of other people, and specifically my view of relationships.
Yeah, and so I kind of got to see this like from afar in Mitch's life. I noticed that after he started following Christ, his life was just really positively changing. The way that he interacted with people was different. The things that he would participate in or not participate in were different. The way he spoke to girls was different. And I just started to really respect him. I also noticed that he wanted to make like a positive impact in his fraternity for God. And so I kind of started noticing all these things in Mitch's life, but kind of from afar. And then about a year later, actually, I went to StuMo's winter conference, SMC. A lot of you guys were just there. And SMC was super, super impactful for me. SMC was when I decided to trust Christ. And after that, my life also started to change in a lot of really similar ways. I just started viewing God really differently. I started viewing other people really differently. And I also started viewing relationships differently.
Yeah, and it was cool to see, like kind of like what Erin said, from my perspective, just Erin's life begin to change, right? We initially were friends just because we partied together, but then we reconnected as we were both trying to like grow in our faith. And so it was this cool new friendship that we had for the rest of my time in college over the course of those 2 years. Eventually, I graduated, came on staff with StuMo. Erin did the same just a year later, but that was where I saw her life like way up close. I got to see every day her at work, and I was like, gosh, there is just something about this Erin McCarthy girl that's just nuts, right? It was awesome. But I noticed her on a totally different level.
Yeah, and so you obviously know where this is going. This is our first date. We went to the Emporium in Old Town. It's so good if you haven't been. And then we went to putt-putt golf at like Old Town Putt.
Yeah, and notice the obvious here. I'm wildly overdressed for putt-putt. I don't care how nice the dinner is, guys. You just don't need to tuck in a shirt at Old Town Putt with a bunch of 9-year-olds running around.
We were like both really nervous.
Super nervous.
For our first date because we'd been friends for so long. And so I think like the only thing I said the whole entire way from him picking me up to the restaurant was I'm so nervous like 20 times. So it wasn't a great start, honestly. But it ended out great because obviously we're here.
Yeah, it worked out, obviously. But we both came into the relationship kind of with very different backgrounds, different ways of doing dating or pursuing relationship. And this was kind of the first time for both of us that we were trying to date in a way that honored God or like put God at the forefront. And so we both had gotten to try relationships and try dating culture's way for a long time, but we also got to see firsthand what it was like to date in a godly way.
Yeah, and so tonight we just kind of want to offer you guys a different perspective than what our culture is offering us on relationships. We want to kind of talk about what culture's way of doing things are and then offer you guys a different perspective. And so when we think about our culture's view of relationships, I feel like our culture is a little bit obsessed with relationships, right? Like how many people in here have seen The Bachelor? Most people? Okay, yeah. If you would have asked me like up to my sophomore year of college what I wanted to do with my life, like 9 out of 10 times I would have told you I wanted to be on The Bachelor. Like that was actually a goal of mine. I was obsessed with the show. And I think a lot of people are. Like there's a reason it's been on for 35 seasons. Like that's crazy. And that's not even to mention Love Island, Love is Blind, like all the reality shows on love and relationships. I mean, we all watch movies about love and relationships, read books about it, and you go on Instagram or TikTok and you watch reels all about relationship advice or looking at other people's relationships and just kind of hoping that you find that one day too. Our culture is just kind of really obsessed with love and relationships and all the stuff that we intake on that. Our culture just really views how we view relationships and how we approach them. And so Mitch and I graduated not too long ago, but we also get to work with college students day in, day out. We feel like we get to see pretty accurately what college relationships look like. And so I'm going to walk through what I've noticed to be kind of the normal college dating process, and y'all can tell me if you agree with me or not. And this is just kind of how we see it go. Typically you meet, maybe it's how we met, you're at a party, or maybe it's mutual friends. And then at some point you connect on social media. And so maybe that's like Snapchat usually. You start Snapchatting back and forth. Maybe you start flirting. You hang out in like group settings. Maybe you start hanging out one-on-one. And eventually, somewhere in that mix, usually hooking up gets introduced. And so it's like you hook up with this person, and then that kind of starts this process that we call whatevering. It's like you're not actually doing anything. You're just flirting with each other, hooking up with each other, but it's not defined at all. It's like really casual. And then if you do that for long enough, you'll have this conversation where you're like, okay, we should probably define this a little bit. So we're like talking. Like we're not going to talk to anyone else, but like me and you are exclusively talking, but we're not dating yet. And then usually if that goes well for long enough, it's like, okay, we should become boyfriend and girlfriend. Would you guys say that's like somewhat accurate to what you see happening? Okay, yeah, totally. This is just kind of what we observed. And not all of this is bad, right? It's not like, oh no, you can't meet at a party. And like, you're not going to find a Bible verse anywhere you look that's like, thou shalt not Snapchat. Like that is not what we're saying. But that's just kind of how we see typical college relationships form.
Yeah, and we want you guys to think for a second of how you've actually gotten to see college or relationships or dating, the culture of that throughout your time in college. So take like a couple of minutes just to talk with someone next to you and describe how you have seen the culture of dating in college, and we'll bring it back.
All right, guys, we'll bring it back. So we actually asked some of y'all just before this talk how you describe the culture of dating in college, and these are just a few of the responses that we heard from some of y'all, and that it's centered around sex. It's all about hookups. A lot of people date with just no really direction, and it's just for fun. It's all about immediate satisfaction, and it can be hard to find commitment. So this is kind of what y'all said about how our culture views and approaches relationships. And so I just want to take a second to look at where this is leading us, like super long term if we zoom out. And so these are some pretty sobering statistics about marriage in the United States. So 50% of marriages end in divorce. And so out of that 50% of people that stay married, 1/3 would say that they're happy. 1/3 would describe their marriage as bearable. And then another third would say that they're unhappily married. And so that leaves about 17% of people that are still married saying they're actually happy. It's kind of sad to think about, and it's definitely not intentional, right? Like, no one gets married and walks down the aisle and is like, I just can't wait to get divorced one day. Or like, no one's praying every night like, oh my gosh, I hope I have a bearable marriage, right? Like, nobody wants that. We all want happy marriages. We all want healthy marriages, except this is just kind of naturally how our culture dates. This is where it is leading us long term. And we say this with just no judgment. We approach dating like this for a really long time. I know I approached dating like this for a super, super long time. And tonight we just want to offer you guys a different perspective on dating. And it's just one that we've gotten to see in our own lives and that we've just gotten to learn as we followed God and looked at his word. And so we want you guys to just be open to considering that God's design could be better than what our culture is offering us. Because if you want something different than these statistics, if you want something different than what culture has, you're going to have to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. If you want something different, you have to do something different. And so tonight we're just going to give you guys 3 reasons of why doing relationships God's way is better, as well as some practicals on how you can start doing that or applying that. And so if you want to take some notes or pull out your phone and write some stuff down, that'd be awesome. 3 reasons, right? We're going to start with this one. 1, God is the designer. God is the designer of and creator of romance and relationships. So if you guys were to open your Bible to page 1, you would find Genesis 1, the story of creation, right? And we're seeing all throughout there, God is creating different things. In the beginning, he says, let there be light, and there was light. He goes on to create the animals, the plants, the sky, all things he's creating. And after every single thing, he says, it was good. He's created all these things, and it was good. And he ultimately gets to creating man, Adam. And he comes to this in Genesis 2, verse 7, which says this, Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And so we see that God forms man to inhabit his creation, right? He gives him purpose to work and to live in the land. But what's interesting is he doesn't say it was good at this time. He doesn't say that at all. In fact, he says something completely opposite, which is super interesting, right? Genesis 2:18, just a few verses down. The Lord God said, It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. And so this is where we see Adam and Eve come into the picture, right? He's creating the first ever relationship between humans. And what's interesting about this is the first relationship that he creates is actually a romantic one between a man and a woman. And so that's an awesome insight into God's design and God's intent for us, right? He's created us for relationships. He's created us for companionship. And he actually lays out this plan for what romance and marriage should look like in our lives. Keeping going just a couple verses ahead in Genesis 2:24, it says, That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So ultimately what this is saying here, it's like, right, the way the world works. You are born, you are a baby, you are raised by your parents, right, nurtured and grown throughout life, you mature. Ultimately, at some point along that journey, you team up or partner with someone else, and you ultimately make that commitment or join with them in marriage. And what it's saying here is that when you make that commitment and join in with someone else in marriage, you're ultimately unified together in a really unique way. So close, such extreme closeness that you are considered one person or one flesh. And that's kind of crazy, right? Like, that's weird to think about a little bit sometimes. But it just goes to show that we were created for this. We were created for relationships, for companionship, and that's why a lot of us feel the need for that, right? That's why culture is always revolving around it. They're just going in a wrong direction. And so understand that it's God's design, and he is for relationships. And so all of that being said, when we think of God as the designer, right, that's the principle here. We need to understand this truth within that. Because God designed it, he's the one who gets to define it.
Yeah, because God designed it, he gets to define it. And so kind of a way to think about this is this analogy. So this is my phone. We all have one, and we all know what the purpose of it is. Like, the person that created this had a really specific thing in mind when he created it. It's to help us communicate with one another. And so I could decide that I want to use this a different way. I could be like, you know what? I just think this is so cute. I'm going to dress it up to like match my outfits, and I'm just never going to turn it on. It's going to be my like permanent accessory. And like, that would be super weird, right? Like, that's obviously not what this was created for. Or I could be like, you know what? I really need a new doorstop. Like, we should totally use this as our new doorstop. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. But I think we do the same thing with relationships. God designed relationships, and therefore he gets to define them. And a lot of times we just decide, hey, we're going to do whatever we feel like doing or use them how we think we should. But really, they're not going to be the most effective or the most satisfying if we're not doing them in the way that God intended them. And so because he designed relationships, he gets to define relationships and tell us how they're actually going to be the most effective and the most satisfying.
Yeah, and so culture is going to give us this picture, right? We're gonna get a lot of influence from culture, right? Whether it's social media, music, movies, pop culture, whatever it is, there's this kind of model that is given to us for what relationships should look like that differs from the designer's intended purpose. And so we gotta really weigh out that balance of like, man, do I want something that's different than what the world is giving us? Because if so, we have to do something different. And so that's our first reason, is that God is the designer. Second reason we have for you guys is that God's way equals commitment over feelings. God's way equals commitment over feelings. And this, guys, might be the most countercultural point that we bring to y'all tonight, but I would argue that it is the most important thing when it comes to relationships and honoring God in dating.
Yeah, so Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Guys, this verse is like a really big deal. It's literally telling husbands to love their wives like Christ loved us when he died for our salvation. Like, that is a really, really big deal. And God's love is a love of commitment. Even though we rebelled against God, he was so committed to us out of love that he still sent his son to die for us. God's love is a love of commitment. And when you think about Jesus dying on the cross, like, that was not a fun thing. And the same people that he was dying to save were the same people who were pinning him onto the cross. And so you can imagine in that moment, he's not like, wow, there's butterflies in my stomach. Like, the chemistry is flowing. We're feeling so good about one another right now. Like, no, he was able to do that because he was so committed to us. He loved us out of a love that wasn't based on feelings, but out of commitment. And so thankfully, Mitch and I aren't trying to kill each other or anything, and he doesn't need to die on a cross for me. But when we said I do to each other, we made a really, really big commitment. And we told each other that even on our worst days, we would still choose to sacrificially love each other out of our commitment. And that's a really beautiful thing because it actually reflects how God loves us and treats us when we don't deserve it. That commitment reflects the commitment that God has towards believers. And so God actually designed romantic relationships to give us a tangible example of his love for us.
Yeah, and that's such a cool picture, right, of like God's commitment to us. And we see that reflected in marriage, in the way we have relationships. Like, the covenant of marriage isn't just about being all in until things get hard, or it stops being fun, right? Or you lose those like lovey-dovey feelings and then you leave. That's just not how God intended it. But that's a lot of what culture would say that it should be. And so we got to understand that it's about committing to that person, right? You've heard the traditional vows, like, till death do us part, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. Like, you know, that's not very like quick or temporary or flippant. Like, that is a commitment till death do you part. And so as we think about how this relates to dating and just relationships that is not marriage, you got to understand that dating is a vehicle to ultimately take you to the point of marriage. Dating is essentially just intentionally finding someone that you want to commit to in marriage. That is the purpose of it. That is the goal of it. That is what it's for. It's intentionally finding someone that you want to commit to. And if you're anything like me in college, you're probably not sitting there thinking about marriage a ton. If you are, that's great. But most people are like, okay, well, that's a little ways away from me, right? Well, you still need to understand this idea that whoever you marry is someone that you will have dated, right? So you want to start implying these things now and thinking of it in that light, because that stuff matters. That is the commitment that you are ultimately trying to figure out if you want to make. And so we need to understand the purpose of marriage while we date. And first, we need to be committed to Christ as he's committed to us, and let that reflect in our relationships around us. I love that about Erin and I, right? Like when we were at the altar saying I do, I knew Erin was committed. Like I'm not questioning if she's going to dip out on me, right? I know she's committed because I see her commitment to Christ and to her walk with God. And that is such a satisfying, relieving thing, because there are hard days. There is conflict. We might hurt each other's feelings. We might break trust. It's going to happen in everybody's life and everybody's relationship. And so you want to have that commitment, right? Have that track record of commitment. And understand that the feelings are going to follow your commitment. And that's something that I would really encourage you to remember. Feelings are going to follow the commitment, right? The more we commit to each other, the more we are going to love each other. And the same is true with our relationship with God. Understand this, guys. God's way prioritizes commitment over feelings. And so the culture is going to tell you the complete opposite, but if we want something different than the way culture is leading us, we have to do something different. So that's the second reason for us, guys. The third reason why doing relationships God's way is better is because God's way is just simply more enjoyable. God's way is more enjoyable. And so for me, coming into college, I viewed relationships kind of as this tool to make me feel good. I was I'm going to just do whatever it takes to get validation from girls. I'm going to do whatever I want to physically get what I want. I'm going to avoid commitment or rejection. And really that just looked like me flirting with as many people as I could, going as physical as fast as I could with, again, as many people as I could, because I thought that's what was best. And I thought that was a good way to have fun with my time in college. I knew that I wanted a family. I knew that I wanted a wife, but I just had this very incorrect view and way down the line mentality when it came to relationships. And it ended up with a ton of hurt.
Yeah, and I kind of looked at dating similarly as something that was fun, but also something that brought me a lot of security and value. I kind of felt like if I could keep a guy on the hook for long enough, it made me feel more valuable. And so when things were going good with guys, I felt great about myself. And then when things were going not great with guys, I felt really insecure. And this really just led me to be searching for a relationship to make me feel security. It led me to hookup culture, lack of commitment, and just ultimately a ton of insecurity. And so I thought going all the way physically, going all the way emotionally with a guy was going to bring me a ton of security, but it actually just brought me the complete opposite. It brought me a lot of insecurity. It brought me a lot of hurt. But what's really cool about God's way is that when we experience those same things, going all the way physically, all the way emotionally, in the context of commitment, it's actually just way more enjoyable. God's design for sex and marriage is actually just way more enjoyable.
Yeah, and we might not think the Bible has much to say about this, right? Like sex and intimacy and things like that, because you're like, it's the Bible. It's not going to say that. But, guys, the Bible is pretty spicy. If you do some digging, you can see that, right? Don't just take my word for it, but we can see that. Here's an example, Proverbs 5:18 and 19. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breasts satisfy you always, and may you ever be intoxicated with her love. Whoa, guys. That is crazy. I'm always calling Erin my doe and graceful deer.
He's not doing that.
I'm not doing that. But how crazy is that, right? The Bible talks about this, and it describes it in this amazing way, and it shows us that God is for romance. He's for intimacy and closeness and sex in this way that is in his creation. So he wants us to experience that in the way that he has designed it, the way that is more fun, enjoyable, it's more safe and secure. It doesn't leave hurt and confusion. And guys, I've been there. I know it's easy to follow culture's way of doing this. I've been in that position, right? Go all the way physically, all the way emotionally. And while it feels easy and good in the moment, or it feels right in the moment, it will always lead to long-term hurt, long-term pain, and confusion. But guys, when we do what's hard in the moment, to say no to those things, to hold off on those things, it leads to long-term satisfaction, long-term fulfillment, enjoyment, safety, and security.
Yeah, God's way actually brings a lot of fun. It brings a lot of security. It brings value. It brings clarity. And so we both used to think that going all the way emotionally, physically would bring us real enjoyment. But there's really nothing more enjoyable than the connection and the depth that you get within the context of commitment. So God's way is just more enjoyable. And that is super, super different than what you're going to hear from culture, right? But again, if you want something different, you're going to have to do something different.
Yeah, and so now we just want to give you guys some practicals of like, how can we apply this in our dating, right? How can we move forward and do this in our life? And so to that end, I would say first, focus on your character. Focus on your character. This is one of the most important things that you could do to grow and step into that relationship or dating. The world will sit there and tell us that we have to look at the outside first. Like, what's the attraction level? Are they hot? You know, how much money do they have? What's the chemistry level? Do they have any riz? Like, all these things are what culture is saying to think about. But Erin, my doe, I am not always going to look like this. I'm not. And you know how much money we have. So those things will fall short and they will fail us. We can't put those things first. We have to put character first. Character is the thing that carries you. It's the thing that kicks in when you're at your worst of the worst, right? Before you look for that in someone else, look at yourself and say, hey, is my character the character of a godly person, a godly man, a godly woman? Focus on becoming that godly man or woman that you would want to date and hopefully marry. Like, that is so, so important. And guys, the sobering truth is that for some of us, maybe it means we need to have some time to be single. Maybe it means you have to have some time to be single and focus on building that character, building those rhythms of connecting with God, being the person that you want to be, right? And that's not for everybody, or that's not something everybody needs to step into, but you know yourself better than anyone, right? Allow God to change you, and he will begin to open those doors. Like, I think of my time in college, I had someone who encouraged me in this, and it was really hard at first to want to do that, but the more and more I began to focus on my character, the more I got to see God actually change my life. And ultimately, one day, I was able to see the door that was opening when I started to notice Erin, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm also really thankful for my time being single. Not only is it just a ton of fun, but I just got to grow a ton in my relationship with God and build a really strong foundation in my relationship with God and figure out who I wanted to be as a woman, but also like what kind of man I wanted to be with one day. And so I wouldn't trade that time for anything.
Yeah, both are great, right? Singleness and relationships are both a gift from God, and they're great times for different purposes, right? And so focus on growing in those times. And once you begin to build that character, guys, you'll definitely be able to see that in other people. Again, I noticed Erin as I was intentionally looking to grow, and it was awesome, the timing of that. I felt like God truly had great timing with that in my life and when I needed it.
Yeah, and so our second practical for you guys is just to pursue boundaries in dating. And so pursuing boundaries is what is going to help you steer clear of falling into culture's way of doing relationships and help you follow God's way. And so if you're anything like me, you hear the word boundaries and it's kind of like, like sounds like no fun. It sounds restricting. Like it just kind of has a negative connotation to it. But boundaries can actually be really, really freeing. They can help protect our relationship from sin and hurt. And so boundaries can be a really, really good thing. I'm a sweet treat girl. I don't know about anyone else in here. Anyone? Yes.
For
Okay.
sure.
I've always been that way. These are photos of me as a little kid. Literally, like half the photos of me when I'm young, I'm eating. And my mom told me at birthday parties, I used to stay back while like other kids were playing with each other, and I would eat all the other kids' desserts. Like I've just always been this way.
She still does that too.
And so I like would ask my mom all the time for sweets, right? Like that's all I wanted. And so many times she would be like, no, like that's not good for you. And now I can see it's like my mom loved me so much that she placed these boundaries in my life because she wanted what was best for me. And that's exactly how God is with us. He loves us so much. He knows us better than anyone else. And so he has some boundaries that are for our best. And so when we're in a dating relationship, we want to look at the boundaries that God has put in place and then set boundaries in our relationship that align with that. I know that was really helpful for us in dating and gave us a lot of freedom. And so we just encourage you guys, if you're like in a dating relationship, to ask someone for advice on setting some boundaries, maybe someone who's a little farther than you spiritually of what that could look like in a dating relationship. I know I'm so thankful that I had input in my life when I was single, dating, and afterward, just to help us keep on track and hold me accountable to who I wanted to be and also just what I wanted our relationship to look like. Because the reality is no one dates perfectly. No one's going to date perfectly. We definitely didn't date perfectly. But our boundaries really, really helped us. And the people in our life really, really helped us hold us accountable to be the people that we wanted to be and to honor God even when things got hard.
Yeah, so that's the second practical for you guys. Just pursue boundaries in dating. The third one is clarity is king. Clarity is king.
So girls, I know that we all have a story in here when we were just a little bit confused by a guy probably. Like maybe he asked you to get dinner and you're like, okay, do I bring my wallet? Like, is he paying? Am I paying? Is it a date? Or maybe it's like, okay, we hang out all the time. We have these like super deep convos and everyone thinks we're best friends and asks what we are, but I don't know how to answer it because like we've never talked about it. Or maybe it's like, okay, I painted him like 4 coolers at this point. We go to every single formal together. We go to all of our date dashes together, but he also Snapchats like all of my roommates. So it's like, what's happening here, you know? And I think a lot of times we just don't say anything about it and we just want to come across as like the chill ones. Like, it's no big deal. I'm just go with the flow. But I think we all know that a lack of clarity can lead to a lot of confusion and it can lead to a ton of hurt. And girls, we're not innocent of this either. We can do this to guys too. And it can lead to a lot of confusion and a lot of hurt for just both parties.
Yeah, and guys, we do this, right? I mean, 4 coolers. Come on, you got to be clear at some point. But right, like for me in college, I was someone who was always wanting to avoid commitment. I was wanting to avoid rejection because I was kind of just insecure. I didn't want to face the music and face that potential of rejection. And so I did everything I could to avoid facing those hard conversations or those bold conversations. But again, if we want to date with a purpose, if we know what the end goal is, we have to be clear in order to avoid that whatevering phase. And really, we see that it honors the other person as well. And it's a huge show of our character if we're someone who can stand up and be clear in those settings. And, you know, I think of how I asked Erin out. I had someone who really encouraged me in doing this as well, and I'm super thankful for that. So I got a pump, clearly, for the mental focus, of course. And I went to Erin face-to-face, and I go, Erin, I have really enjoyed getting to know you for the last couple years, and I would love to get to know you some more. Would you want to go on a date with me this Friday? And guys, she said,
Can I think about it? So probably I thought wasn't the most encouraging response ever, but I actually had a crush on Mitch at this point. So it's not like I had these like big reservations about it or anything like that. But I just really wanted to think about like, okay, do I feel like I'm ready to get in a relationship? And so once I felt like I was like, yeah, that is something I really want to do. We met, we were like on our way to work. We parked. I get out of my car and Mitch is in his car. I like walk up to like be like, yeah, like I want to go on a date. He opens his door and it was snowing outside and he completely eats it on the ice. Like literally so bad that he's completely horizontal laying in the snow and has one leg like fully up into the car. It was so sad. to see.
And guys, we're talking like, I promise this is not some like exaggeration thing. Like, this is a plot point in a movie where the character has like a turn of events. This is like a true thing. And I'm a concussion prone guy. And I thought I was going to be at like a 3rd grade reading level for our first date. And I'm pretty sure she gave me a pity yes.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a pity yes. But
Okay.
the good thing, I was saying yes, because can you imagine if I'm like also no, like while he's on the
Gosh.
ground? Anyway, as funny as that story is, we share that story of Mitch asking me out just because I really respected how clear he was with me. Like, I loved that when we were on our first date, I wasn't sitting there wondering if it was a date or not, or if he wanted to pursue a relationship with me. Like, I knew from the get-go that's what he wanted, that's what we were doing. And it was really helpful for me because then I got to decide, okay, well, what do I want out of this? Do I want to pursue this relationship? And it just made him a lot more attractive to me that he was clear with me on the front end about that. about that.
Yeah. Guys, it's worth it to be clear. And for the record, I was really impressed at how clear Erin was as well with her response. Like, I knew that she was seriously considering these things, and it showed me a lot about her character as well. So overall, it is just so worth it to be clear, right? And that was a big risk for me. Like, I was the guy that didn't do asking out in person. I didn't make it clear beforehand because I was afraid of the rejection. So, Erin was someone that was worth being clear with. And I think it's a huge show of respect for the person that you're asking out. And so don't be DMing. Don't snap them and say, do you want to go on a date? Don't text them. Just nut up and ask them on a date.
You said it, not me.
Write that down. But all that being said, guys, those are the 3 reasons and the 3 practicals we have for you guys on why doing relationships God's way is worth it. It's better, and how you can go about doing that, guys. Because again, if we know what culture's way is, and we want something different than that's giving us, we have to do something different.
Yeah, so we just want to leave you guys with some applications. And the first are really just those practicals that we talked about. To grow in your character, pursue boundaries, and to pursue clarity. And in all of these things, finding a mentor to help you in these things, I would attribute so much of my spiritual growth, and I know that Mitch would attribute a ton of his spiritual growth, just having people in our lives that we can ask questions to that want to help us grow in our faith and that are a little farther along than us. And so if you don't have a person in your life like that, we highly encourage that. StuMo's a great place to find that too. So if that's something you're looking for, I know some of us staff would love to talk to you about what that could look like to get more plugged in. But I'm just really thankful that we had people input in singleness, in my dating relationship, and still today in our marriage. Mentorship has been super, super huge for us. And then lastly, these are just some resources to check out if you kind of want to learn more about what God has to say about dating, love, relationships. It's such a big topic. There's only so much we can cover at a StuMo night, but these are some of our favorites, and we're really thankful. We actually read all of these books when we were single, and are really glad that we did. So Outdated by Jonathan Pokluda, Loving Your Husband Before You Even Have One. That's a great one for girls. And then Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller is also awesome.
For the record, I did not read Loving Your Husband Before You Have One, but Erin says it's a great book. So
really good for girls.
Highly recommend. But guys, thank you so much for letting us share our story. And I hope that you found it challenging. I really hope that you found it helpful. And we would love to expand on these things. If you have any questions, we'd love to talk with you guys. But again, I've said it enough, and I'm going to say it again. If you want something different than the world is giving you, you have to do something different. That's all we got for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.